Mike Gayle. Wow, I haven't seen you for so long.
I
Well,
know, I know.
um, congratulations on this fantastic book, All
Thank you
the
very
Lonely
much.
People. Um, I've literally really enjoyed reading it. Can you tell me a bit about it? And anyway, how lovely to see your face.
It's good to see your face too. Thank you very much. Imogen and I go way back. Well, actually, way back. We're being polite because she's a lady, clearly. So, All the Lonely People is about Hubert Bird, and he's an 84-year-old pensioner. And every week, his daughter calls from Australia, and he paints the perfect picture of the perfect retirement. You know, he tells her about West End shows that he's been to, and gardening centres that he's been visited, and activities that he's done with his older. You know, he's got some friends as well that he does things with. So this is the picture that he paints for his daughter. Unfortunately, none of it is true. He's actually a very lonely person, and he doesn't see anybody from week to week. And really, the story is about what happens when various events occur. So for instance, one of the things that happens is his daughter informs him that she's going to make her first visit home in quite a while, and so suddenly he has to sort of basically replicate the world that he's been telling her about before she arrives. So he needs to try and get some friends and sort out all sorts of things. But at the same time, it's also the story of how Hubert became lonely. And so we sort of alternate between present time and the past. And so in the past, we start from Hubert being with his family in Jamaica and making the decision to come to England in the late 1950s, and then his arrival in England and the response that he gets, and how the people he meets along the way and starting a family and all sorts of things, and the two stories ultimately come together. So yeah, that's what it's about in a nutshell.
It feels very personal, this book, in comparison to lots of your other ones, in a sort of very different way. It feels like you've opened up, put your heart on this into this one. I mean, Hubert is the loveliest character I've ever come across.
Oh, thank you.
Even though he's a misanthrope, or is he's such a gentle soul, and you paint a very bleak picture of 1950s London, with the labour exchange and all the rubbish jobs that he has to do. I mean, how much is research, and how much is it from your own personal family history, or what? Tell me a bit more about the process behind the construction of the book.
Well, I suppose it sort of inspired. I mean, my parents came to England in the late, I think the sort of mid 60s actually. So they, unlike Hubert, who arrived by boat, my parents arrived by plane. But it was I suppose when Hubert arrives, he's had a world painted for him back in Jamaica because it was a colonial system, and so a lot of all their education was all about England and the mother country, and they were made to feel that they were British. That was the whole thing. And so, for Hubert and people like him who were, I suppose, the first generation to arrive, it was a real shock to the system, because they thought that, yes, we're British, so we'll be welcomed. We're being invited, because this is post-war England. There's a labour shortage. We need the Commonwealth to help the mother country. So they were coming thinking that they were helping out the mother country, only to realise that actually the mother country isn't all that and a bag of chips. The accommodation is awful, the food's not great, and the people don't seem to want them there. Well, a lot of the people don't seem to want them there. And it's a sort of a similar situation for my parents. So my parents came in the mid, as I said, in the mid-60s, and I think perhaps slightly better than Hubert's situation, but not necessarily that much better. You know, the accommodation still wasn't great. There was a great deal of prejudice that they faced, and I suppose I was thinking. I suppose I wanted to draw on those sorts of things and draw on sort of the experience of sort of the you know what has been called the Windrush generation. And I did do a lot of research, and you know, there are some amazing sort of documentaries about you know, those proper black and white sort of BBC ones that are what to do when you meet a gentleman from the Caribbean, and what might they say, sort of things. And it's all really shocking, and you know, you can't even believe that it really happened now. But so I wanted to sort of capture that experience, and so while it might not necessarily be my parents' experience, it was definitely the experience of people that they knew, people who had come in a generation before. And that's what I sort of really want to sort of tap into.
And were you influenced by, I mean, because it seems incredibly modern and prescient for this book to be coming out right now.
I know.
when everything is going off, as it were. I mean, were you influenced by, I mean, how long did it take you to write? Is it just chance or circumstance that seems like a hot topic? Or
it's bizarre. It's like, you know, I finished it back in September last year, 2019, and you know, I was talking with my agent and my editor, and we were all saying, you know, you couldn't have chosen two hotter topics, you know, of race and loneliness. I mean, who could have predicted that there would be a global pandemic, and who could have predicted that the Black Lives Matter movement would suddenly come to the fore? And so these two topics are very hot. But at the same time, I suppose they're things that have always been there. You know, it's, you know, speaking to my friends who you know, speaking to black friends, you know, it does feel a little bit like the world has suddenly just realised that racism exists, and you know, we're all like, yeah, well, you know, we've sort of known that pretty much all our lives, and it's a sort of similar sort of thing with loneliness. You know, loneliness isn't a new phenomenon. You know, people have been lonely for a very long time, and I suppose, but again, I suppose what we're saying is that these things have come to the fore because they're on the global stage. People, you know, who have been isolating from COVID are really feeling lonely and in need of connection. And I suppose this is what the book's about. It's about people trying to find connection and the need for connection.
And yet his daughter feels a very sort of modern, very carefree type character. Do you know what I mean? Almost like she's unencumbered by any of the baggage that her father has had to deal with.
Well, it would again, and that's true, you know, because she's a generation on, and so you know,
she's got a great job, hasn't she? Yeah.
She's got this great job. So she is a professor, and she works in Australia, and she's you know, she's worked her way through the ranks, and she's a professional. And so I suppose in the world that she lives is much different to the world that Hubert lived, because Hubert, you know, he was you know, he sort of did manual jobs back in Jamaica. He did manual jobs when he's here, but you know, his desire is always for his children to, I suppose, become better than him, you know, in terms of their jobs and things like that. And so, you know, she does fulfill a lot of his dreams when she goes to university, and you know, when she becomes a professor. So yes, her life is very different to Hubert's. Yeah.
And poor old Hubert feels like he's sort of just a man who's fallen out of love with the world, or has the world fallen out of love with him? I mean, that is the question.
Well, this is it. It's almost a little bit like he's fallen between the cracks because, and you know, that was one of the things I really wanted to think about was when we see lonely people, when we meet people who are lonely, you know, people they're not born that way, and I just thought it'd be interesting to just find out, okay, how does someone become lonely? And that's one of the things I really wanted to do with this book, was to sort of look at it, an entire life. So we have this, I suppose, a scope that I've never really done before, taking someone from the 1950s all the way, you know, through the, you know, 60s, 70s, the 80s and 90s, 2000s, right up to the present time. And during that process, we discover how he becomes lonely. And that's, I suppose, one of the secrets of the heart of the novel is, you know, why is Hubert lonely? How did he become lonely?
And did you plot his whole life? I mean, how did you write it? I mean, because that's 40 years of plots to work
exactly
with.
Yes
and also you swing backwards and forwards between the present, and you know, it's, I mean, if you were filming it, there would be a continuity problem. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Work out, because obviously one thing impacts on something else, so you've got to be very careful. How carefully did you plot it before you started writing?
Well, I knew that it's not about, it was never going to be about telling his entire life, but more picking out moments, key moments from his history, the things that are going to have the knock-on effect throughout the rest of his life. And so I did sort of, I knew that there would be a little bit more time spent in the 1950s because, you know, he was going to have to arrive and acclimatise himself, and you know, he meets Joyce, the love of his life, and there are things to kind of go on there, but then, you know, it's also about his children, and it's also about what happens when they grow up as well. So it was more sort of just thinking, okay, this is where we're going to begin, this is where we're going to end, and these are the sort of key points in between. I think that's the way I managed it, yeah.
And you're very well known for writing contemporary fiction. Is this the first time that you've gone a little bit historical?
It is, and I found it completely terrifying. I stay away from stuff like that. You know, I just can't. It was my idea of a nightmare. And I suppose it's that thing of when you're a writer, you always think, can I do this? And because we've got deadlines and things like that, you're never really thinking you're never really sort of thinking. I mean, you want to experiment and you want to do all sorts of things, but you also want to be able to deliver. And so I'm very much a planner, and I have been for probably about 10, 15 years now. And so my normal routine is that I will come up with an idea, I will flesh it all out, and then I'll talk to my agent and editor about the idea before I even write a word. And when I sent them the synopsis for All the Lonely People, they said, great, we love it. But what we could really do with is, they both said, we want more backstory. And I was just like, and I'd minimized the backstory. I knew there had to be backstory for this, but I'd minimized it because I deliberately didn't want to do anything that was. Sorry?
You didn't want to do any research.
I didn't want to do any research. I didn't want to do anything that was just outside my comfort zone. And but the minute they sort of said it, I sort of, it's a little bit like just being caught out, where you sort of hope that they won't notice, and they went, yeah, we think there should be more of this, and I know there should be more of it, and I have deliberately avoided it. But actually, it was one of the bits that I enjoyed most. There are so many resources out there, so to kind of get a flavour of so I went through a whole spate of watching 1950s films, and with YouTube now, these amazing, you know, the pathé reels of the sort of Windrush generation arriving, but also sort of interviews, contemporary interviews with people, but also because of the whole Windrush scandal as well, there was lots of information out there, and there were so many books as well, and fiction that was written at the time that all sort of fed into, actually, I'm really enjoying this. And you know, I suppose the thing you always fear with research is that you end up sounding like a textbook, but really what you're trying to do is take all of that research in and then sort of use it to just add a little bit of colour to what you're doing. But really the focus is on you knowing what the limits of your time is. That's the essence of it, really, and filling in a bit of the background.
Yeah, also there is that terrible temptation to show off how much you know.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
So then you start putting in little bars that you found out, or little drinks that they might have, or a special width of tie or something, and then you become like a 1950s ball.
Exactly, and I was very careful not to do that, you know, and it was just like, they go to the cinema at one point, and I was really conscious of the fact that, you know, about release dates and all sorts of things that I was, and I was at one point, I sort of thought to myself, that fits because that film was released at this point and it would have been playing at this time. And I sort of want to put that information in there because I spent quite a lot of time trying to work it out, but I didn't, you know, so that was good.
So that was a good edit. That was a good edit. You're happy with that one. You're happy.
Hold myself back.
You know, it's really difficult, isn't it? Because having done historical fiction, you just, the idea is basically just to wear your knowledge lightly and
very much so.
move through. Well, it's hugely successful. I have to say that those were the bits I liked most. Well, so your agent was completely right, but it's a fantastic book. You must be really thrilled with it.
I am, actually, because it's just one of those things where because my agent and editor aren't the people who have to deliver it, so they can sort of make all sorts of grand promises and say, yes, you could do it, you do this, you do that, but it was me in the process of doing it just thinking, oh, actually, I can do this. And it was a really nice experience because, like I say, I mean, you've got deadlines, you've got so many different pressures. The temptation is always to sort of play it safe, and so it's nice to sort of take a risk and see it pay off. So I'm really happy with it. You know, it's the feedback I've been getting has been really incredible because I mean, it's a good book in and of itself, but I mean, it just so fits with our current times. I think everything that is going on is so relevant. It's about loneliness, and it's also about race, but it's also about community, and it's also about the power of ordinary people to make a difference. And I think that is something also that's really key, and we're seeing in the world more and more people are, instead of waiting for change to come from the top down, it's change coming from grassroots, and I find that really exciting.
And are you tempted to keep going in this sort of punchy genre, or have you got another book up your sleeve, or are you just riding this one for the moment, or are you playing around?
I've already started the next book, so this is, you know, writing in COVID times. It's not been the easiest of things. You know, I had before lockdown happened, I had a really good groove going in my book, and you know, I was really, really getting into it, and then suddenly the whole world changed overnight, and it became quite difficult to write. I know. I mean, the strange thing is that, you know, my life wasn't that much different in terms of, you know, I work from home, but it was the fact that, you know, my kids were home, and you know, I could go to a cafe to work, and the gym wasn't there anymore because that used to be my sort of afternoon treat. And yes, it has been really difficult. And you know, it's not the book that I'm working on now isn't a COVID book. thankfully. But I do wonder whether, well, for one, I think it's been hard to write, just to concentrate, to sit down and, you know, especially in the early days, you know, it was just the temptation to just be news watching all the time was you know, ever present. But I think also, I suppose I just found it difficult to, you know, suddenly you're seeing the sort of world in the sort of the bigger themes. You know, it's a global pandemic, and you're sort of thinking about your book in the context of that, and it's quite difficult to remind yourself that actually what you're doing is of value and is important, because you know, I think one of the things that sort of followed, if there's a common theme through, you know, I've been writing now for 22 years, and if there's a common theme throughout all my books, it is about smallness. It's about everyday. It's about ordinary people living ordinary lives, and I suppose it's quite difficult to have that sort of mindset when suddenly everything is writ so large, and it's this global thing that happens that sounds almost like it should be in a Hollywood film. So I found it difficult, but hopefully it should be okay.
And what's it called, and when's it coming out?
Oh, what's it called? At the minute, it is called The Museum of Ordinary People, and it'll be due out 12 months from now, hopefully.
And are you like who did I speak to? Was it Jenny? No, I've forgotten who it was. Who was a machine writer, so who basically does one every year, and every year you have one out at around this time. I mean, do you have a whole process that you're 6 months research, 6 months writing, or do you know what I mean, or is that?
I would love 6 months research, 6 months writing. I am a one a year. I mean, there have been years where I haven't quite managed it, but generally speaking, I am one a year, and it is difficult. It is difficult, and you know, sometimes I sort of do dream about, what would happen if I had 2 years or 3 years and longer time between books. But I've recently, you know, and it sort of always used to be my sort of dream, you know. That's it. More time will mean everything is better, and I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think just sometimes more time is more time. I will, you know, I think you cut your cloth, that you know, you cut your clothes according to your cloth, and I think if I had 3 years, I would just take 3 years to write pretty much the same book. There is something about deadlines that sort of does solidify things, I think, for you. I think as a writer, you need deadlines. I think you know, I'm quite a driven person, but I think it's very easy to become demoralized, or it's very easy to sort of focus on things that don't need to be focused on. But when you've got a deadline, and you know, you're looking at, you know, I've got a big calendar on the wall here, and so I can see how much time I've got before I reach my deadline. It's a great way to go, do you know what? You haven't got time to do that.
Oh,
And
like a wagging finger, like a wagging finger on your wall.
Exactly. Yes, a big, gigantic wagging finger, just saying, look, get on with it. So, yeah.
That's very funny. I noticed at the back of your book that you've got lots of lovely dedications and things. And this is from the old gang. So when I first met you, we did this big book for War Child together.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
And I see all of our old mates are still in here. There's Fran North. There's I mean, there's who else here? I had to put my glasses on and see. Sophie Kinsella, Lisa Jewell. It's Lisa Jewell who's the one who writes book a year. He's the machine. And how much do you still see these guys? Because it was a really big publishing thing that we did.
It was an amazing thing. So basically, it was the girls' night in, boys' night out. Was it girls' night out, boys' night in? And it was like a collection of sort of young writers from. It's around 2001 it came out, and we all became friends from doing that. And the funny thing is that everybody thinks that sort of the world of writing is sort of really sort of cutthroat and everybody hates everybody. But actually, I've never met a nicer bunch of people. And the fact of the matter is that, you know, I still see all those people, and I consider them close friends, you know, across, you know, 20 odd years, you know. And before lockdown, my last visit to London was to see those guys. I met up with, you know, I met up with a bunch of them, and you know, that's the last time I was been in London. So, you know, we still see each other, we still hang out, and it's nice actually. It's nice to see how we've all grown and changed, and yeah, you know, I think it was a heyday for publishing, certainly, but I really think there's a real nice camaraderie there, and you know, I think it was probably, I suppose, publishing's last great heyday in a wider sense. I mean, not to say that publishing is over or anything like that, but these were, you know, there was no Netflix, you know, mobile phones were for calling people. You know, it was, you know, it was the time before books really had to sort of fight for their place amongst all the other things that could distract people.
And do you know much about how much that book raised for War Child?
I've got a feeling, I wanted to say it was about £250,000, but I got a feeling that it might have been probably about twice that amount.
The whole series raised over £1 million.
Really? That's amazing.
I know.
That is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And to think that was just, again, you know, I suppose we going back to the book, this is just people, ordinary people, having an idea and making it happen. And £1 million raised for charity. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was amazing. Well, that's how we knew each other. That's when we became friends. I mean,
very much so.
Yeah, no, we're all in the same group. Honestly, Mike, I can't say how nice it is to see you again and how fantastic this book is. And I am so grateful for you to coming on today. I think it'll be amazing. I do think it would be a fantastic film. I hope somebody offers on it very soon.
Well, hopefully, yeah, we'll keep our fingers crossed.
Listen, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you. Take care.